Alright, guys, we are back with the Beatryce prophecy, and we are at chapter 44. She was in a cell in a dungeon. She was no longer wrapped in a cloak, but she might as well have been. It was that dark in the cell. Her head itched, but before they had all gone to sleep in Cannock's tree, Brother Edict had told her that this was because her hair was growing back. Were those the last words Brother Edict had spoken to her? And if so, why would they have not been more important words? She remembered suddenly being in the tower room. Her mother was at the spinning wheel, and Beatryce was at her feet, bent over the tutor's book about the king who had been turned into a wolf. She was reading the story to her mother, and her mother was nodding, smiling, and spinning. The small room was filled with light. It was very good. It is very good, Beatryce, said her mother. It is a good story, and you read it wonderfully well. But remember, if someone outside of this house were ever to ask you if you could read or write, you must say that you cannot. You must never admit to what you can do. There may well come a day when things will be different, and you will claim your powers, but for now we must be careful. Do you understand? Yes, Beatryce had said, although she had not truly understood, but her mother had understood. Her mother had known. Her mother, where was she? The dream of the long hallway in the empty tower room and the black bird sitting on the window below her. He has taken her. Do not think of it, she said aloud to herself. What then, to think of? Answelica, her head like a rock, her eyes like planets, her great and ferocious love. Surely the goat was on her way. Surely they were all on their way to her. Beatryce wrapped her arms around her legs to warm herself, and it was cold, very cold. She felt as though the darkness were trying to swallow her up. She must not allow that to happen. She must stay herself. You promised me the story of my mermaid, Brother Edict had said to her. Very well, Brother Edict, she said aloud. I will tell you the story of the mermaid. And so she went back to the words that she had written in the other darkness, the darkness of the soldiers' room at the inn. Once there was a mermaid. Once there was a mermaid. Those were the words that Beatryce of Abelard said to herself in the dungeon. In the castle of the king, she let the words of the story rise up as if they were already written on the pages of a book. She made believe that she was reading the words aloud, telling a story to someone she loved in a room filled with light. Once there was a mermaid. Chapter 45. It was late morning when they came upon the black-bearded robber. He dropped from a tree in front of Jack Dory, and the knife was between his teeth. He said, I'll take that pretty sword, but the words were hardly out of his mouth before Answelica lowered her head and sent the robber flying through the air with such force that the knife fell from his mouth and went flying too. When the robber landed, the goat stood over him, and she showed him her terrible teeth, and she bit him in the arm, and then she danced from hoof to hoof, waiting for the man to stand up so she could send him flying again. Jack Dory would have laughed at it all, but there was nothing to laugh about. He knew this man. This was the one who killed his parents. How often had he dreamed of that black beard and bright knife? How many times had he longed to be face to face with a man and exact his revenge? Jack Dory went and stood beside the dancing goat. He put the tip of his sword at the man's throat. Do not, came Cannock's voice. This one, said Jack Dory. He is the one who killed my mother and father. His voice shook. I see him every night in my dreams, and now I will kill him and see him no more. Killing him will not banish him from your dreams, said Cannock. I can assure you of that. Think on who you are, Jack Dory. I'm thinking on it, said Jack Dory. I am well and truly thinking on it. His heart stuttered, and the goat danced, and Jack Dory kept the tip of the sword on the man's neck. Cannock bent down and picked up the robber's knife. He held it out so that Jack Dory could see it. Here's the man's knife, said Cannock. He is nothing without it. Jack Dory looked at the knife, and then he looked back at the robber's face, and he pressed the tip of the sword harder against the man's throat. Answelica made a high, impatient noise, and she moved from hoof to hoof. She displayed her terrible teeth. Come, come, she seemed to say. There was no time to waste on revenge. We must find her. Jack Dory wondered when it was that he had started to hear what the goat was thinking. It was troublesome having goat's thoughts in his head. Again he pressed the sword deeper, and the world narrowed to nothing but Jack Dory and the sword and the robber's neck. Go on and do it, said the robber through gritting teeth. I don't care. Jack Dory looked up from the man, and he bent his head back up high in the sky, beyond the trees, beyond the dark woods, and the robber and the sword and the goat and the knife. The sun was shining. Jack Dory kept his sword where it was. He felt the sun warm on his face and the bee buzzing around his head. If he moved his fingers just so, he could feel the letter engraved upon the hilt of the sword, and it was an E. He had not known that. Now he did know it. The letter E. Letters. Letters that become words. Words that became stories. Stories that had been told what had happened, what would happen. And the B buzzed louder. B, which began with the letter B. And then what? What letters came next? How is it that you spelled the word B? Jack Dory asked, his face still tilted up at the sun. What? Said the robber. It begins with the letter B, said Brother Edict. Aye, said Jack Dory, but that I know. And then what? The B is followed by an E, and then another E, said Brother Edict. His voice was calm, certain. B-E-E, is it? Said Jack Dory. It is, said Brother Edict. And Swelka made another noise of impatience. The letters were put together to form words, said Jack Dory, and the words become the things of the world. Yes, said Brother Edict, and Jack Dory closed his eyes and opened them again, and he lowered his head and looked down at the robber. You killed my parents, said Jack Dory. And if you said I did, said the man, he smiled. Stand up, said Jack Dory, and the robber rose slowly to his feet. Jack Dory kept his sword at the man's neck. All the while, you, said Jack Dory, are nothing. You are only someone who takes. And the robber grinned. Just as you say, wasn't it me who took the soldier to your little friend? Beside Jack Dory, the goat tensed up, held still. A soldier of the king, said Jack Dory. Who else? Said the robber. Forget him, boy, Jack Dory heard Answellica say. It is what I say. All that matters now is that we find her. Jack Dory spat at the man's feet, and he said, It makes no difference to me whether you live or die, not at all. He lowered the sword, and his arm ached from holding it out before him. Cannock handed Jack Dory the robber's knife. Come, he said. Now, said the goat. Jack Dory slid the knife into his belt, and he turned his back on the robber and walked away. And the boy followed the goat, and Cannock and Brother Edict followed the boy, and the bee buzzed happily, approvingly, around Jack Dory's head as he walked forward, away. Chapter 46. A man came to Beatryce in the dungeon. He was carrying a needle and dressed in a black cloak. He smelled of cloves and rancid oil. I'm a counselor to the king, he said. You will stand. And Beatryce slowly stood. She was glad, so glad, to see the candle, to see the little bit of light. So, said the counselor, here, then is Beatryce. Beatryce Abelard. Yes, she said, the one whom the prophecies speak. Yes, she said again. She stood straight. Or proud are you, said the counselor. Prophecies mean nothing, my child. They are nothing but shiny baubles, bright distractions, pretty words used to manipulate kings and comfort fools. And the man's voice was familiar. Why? The counselor held the candle in such a way that it was illuminating her face and not his own. Who are you? She said. She wrapped her hands around the bars of the cell, and she tried to see the counselor's face. Ah, you are remembering, I see. You are recalling. Yes, I will come to you, I'm sure. In the meantime, what if I were to tell you a story? She said nothing. The story begins this way. Once there was a learned man, and one fine day he came to a castle perched on the edge of the sea, and the man had been called to the castle to tutor the 3 children of a noble man, and the noble man had died fighting in some war for some cause or another. Who knows what it was? So the learned man came to the castle to teach this man's children, and you can imagine the man's surprise when he found that the eldest of the 3 was a girl, and that he was expected to tutor her as well. I cannot teach a girl, said the learned man. It is against the law. I wish her to be educated, said the noblewoman, and her father agreed with my wishes. Well, the learned man was so bewitched by the beauty and charms of the woman that he did she asked. He broke the law. He taught the girl to read and write, and she learned very quickly. Do not tell me any more, said Beatryce. I do not want to hear. You'll listen to what I tell you, Beatryce of Abelard. You'll listen to all of it. So, the learned man fell in love with the nobleman's wife, and he offered himself to her, but she would not accept his love. You see, this woman had a twisted notion in her head that one day her children might rule the kingdom. Yes, that even her daughter might be in a position of power. She told the learned man this, and he laughed at her. Most likely she assumed that because he was not of noble birth, he would never understand the duties of the lineage and power. She dismissed him. He went away from Castle Abelard, and the counselor now held the candle up so close to his face that she could see it. He smiled. Yes, he said, you know me, Beatryce. You know me well. I am the one who taught you to read. I am the one who was sent away from you. But no matter. It has all turned out quite well. In spite of the fact that I am not of noble birth, I have made my way to the halls of power, and I am the maker of destinies. I made a king. This king was nobody. Do you know how many youngest sons of the youngest sons there are? But I made the prophecy come true. I made him king, and now I control him, which means I control everything. Do you understand? She did understand, and she was terrified, but she stood straight and true and said, I would like to see this king. And the counselor laughed, and a sudden gust of air from his mouth made the candle flame flicker. You would like to see the king? Yes, said Beatrice. And what of your mother? Would you like to see her as well? Beatrice felt her heart fall to her toes. The long hallway flashed through her mind, and then came the empty tower and the black bird turning to look at her and saying, He has taken her. Where is she? She whispered. Where is my mother? All in good time, Beatrice. First, I will go and have a word with the king, and I will let him know that you have safely arrived. He has been waiting for you. The counselor blew out the candle, and the darkness returned full force. You see how it is, he said. You see who is in charge here? It is not you. It is no longer you or your mother. And that was chapter 46.